Welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined by John Gibson as we look ahead to Newcastle United's trip to Turf Moor on Tuesday to face Burnley. John, welcome back to the podcast. Did you have a nice Christmas?
Well, there's a good question. No, I was a bit like a frog, if you remember the thought, which has stayed exactly like that. And Manchester United didn't ease the pain in any way. So let's at least go into the new year on a slight up, and it would only be a slight up in beating Burnley. But goodness gracious me, we can't think about not beating Burnley because that would be as low as you can get. But I mean, there we are, Manchester United. We were full of hope, or at least the hope was based more on the law of averages than on the form of Newcastle United, i.e., the way form must be turned round sometime. And you rightly said, Andrew, that Manchester United are bang average. But I'll tell you what, we're bang average. We are bang average. Take away our biasness of this is Newcastle United, this is our club, we're a Champions League side, we're current holders of the League Cup. Yes, we're all those things. You know what? We're also bang average.
Yeah, it's looking like that at the moment. Of course, if you look at the squad and the team on paper, we should be much higher up in the league, but it's just not clicking. Let me, John, paint a picture for you of my Christmas. It's day 7 down at the in-laws, so I don't need to say too much other than that. But my father-in-law is a Villa fan. So not only did I have the displeasure of watching the Man United game with him and having to explain to him why a lot of possession doesn't really mean too much because we're in December and at this point possession doesn't win your games. I then had to sit through him being as low as a snake's belly at half time to suddenly being top of the Christmas tree come full time because Ollie Watkins won Villa the game and now they're firmly in a title race. So that's been the last few days. And going into this Burnley game, I'm also not predicting too much joy for Newcastle, but we'll get to that at the end of the show.
Mean, that thing you've said about Villa, and I've banged on about it both in print and the Chronicle online and in podcasts. We can be compared to Aston Villa in terms of two historical clubs who have had their nose outside the tuck shop window instead of inside for far too long. And it's about time we smashed, and we've both tried to smash our way in from the same position. And ironically, with two sort of similar managers, in as much as Emery should have been ours and turned us down and went to Villa. And at the beginning of the year, as you well remember, when we went down to Aston Villa at the start of the season, they were in absolute disarray. They'd lost good players. They had an upset Martinez, an upset Watkins, who thought they were going to get big transfers and didn't. Emery was upset because people were supposed to be bought by the board and weren't. And they started the season off horrendously. They were in bigger trouble than we are now. And look at how spectacularly they've turned that round without the help of a transfer market window, because by then it had closed. But they've welded the boys together. They've formed a pattern. He's an innovative coach. He changes things in match, etc., etc. And it's 10, 11 wins on the bounce in all competitions, and they're standing third top. So it can be done. The turnaround can be done, and they've done it. And that sticks in my throat because I'm not a Villa fan to start with. And Emery haven't turned us down. He's not my most precious manager, but I've got to admit it, tactically in that, he's a very, very clever boy. And what's made this really sickening for me is that Villa faced our problems plus a couple more and have turned it round spectacularly. We cannot turn it round.
Yeah, 2 points there, I guess, as you alluded to. That kind of gives you the hope and belief that it can be turned around, and look what can happen when it does click and you go on 11 wins. Not that we've seen too much encouragement of that under Eddie Howe at this moment in time. And the other thing is that in-game management, a lot of talk about Unai Emery saw the vulnerability of Chelsea, made the substitutions, and it worked perfectly. A lot of criticism of Eddie Howe that he doesn't quite do that. We saw against Manchester United, where Newcastle had nearly 75% of the ball in that second half. passing it left, right, backwards, trying to go forward, but they couldn't break that Manchester United defence down. Didn't really test the keeper too much in the second half. Lewis Hall hit the bar, but other than that, nothing really to write home about. And yet the subs that came on were pretty much like for like. And I think that is an understandable question to be asked of Eddie Howe, is that, can more be done when you're making these substitutions to change the formation, to change the approach? Could you have played two up top, etc.? Do you sit there, John, and ask those questions of Eddie Howe?
Totally and utterly. I think it's about time Eddie Howe ripped up his tactics book completely and threw it in the dustbin and forgot about it. Forgot about formations, forgot about trust, forgot about like for like. I mean, he first of all, when he selects his team, and then when he makes his subs, he sticks 4-3-3. If there's any team changes, it's Bonds for Gordon or Elanga for Murphy, or Woltemade switched with Wissa or a false nine. It's the centre halves alternated when everybody's fit. It's Botman or it's Burn, and it's Shaw or it's Chow. Nothing changes. Teams have sussed us out. They know Newcastle United now. They know the high press. They know the high press isn't as effective with Woltemade instead of Isaac. They know the way we'll play. They know that during the game, if it's not working, why do you put like for like on? You've got to change things. That's what Emery did. That's what good coaches do. And Eddie it served him well, maybe, so far. I'm not having a go at what he's done in the past. But Eddie, look in the mirror, my son. It is not working. We're going into a new year. You've done it for the whole first half of the season. It hasn't worked. What do you do next? At the moment, you're standing like King Canute, telling the tide to turn. But you've got to make it turn. You can't ask it to turn. And the only way Newcastle United's season's going to turn is he's got to try something else tactically. All right, he can't go three at the back and push wing backs up because he hasn't got three centre halves fit, as far as we know at this moment for Burnley. But he's got to change something elsewhere. Go two up top. Go Wissa and Woltemade. Do something different. Please do something different. Don't look at that team and say, well, Gordon was hopeless, so I'll start Bonds. Murphy didn't do it too much, so I'll start Elanga. Or shall I play Ramsey, or shall I play Willock, or shall I bring Joe Linton back? Same old, same old, same old. Shake the team into saying, whoa, what's he doing today? Hey, wait a minute, we better get a grip of it. Shake, flummox the opposition, and help the fans feel that we're trying to do something to right the wrong. We're just doing what is being tried and trusted, and it isn't working. It's repeatedly not working.
I agree with you. I think it is time for a system change. I think he's maybe a little bit stuck with using one up top for the moment because Wissa's probably not fit enough. But, if you can play them for an hour.
You started him in one match, though. You started him already.
No, I get that, and I understand that is the
if we don't gamble, Andrew, now it'll happen. It's all a gamble. There's a reason for not doing everything. You can produce a reason for not doing everything. And the reason for not starting Wissa and Woltemade together is that Wissa's not quite ready. Well, you started him the other day and he scored in 3 minutes. But I tell you what, it's not a matter of he's not ready. It's a matter if Eddie Howe doesn't want Woltemade and Wissa necessarily playing together because he thinks it's one or the other. He doesn't want to change his style of play. And he's got to play. If it's always going to be one or the other, why on earth did he buy Woltemade? Forget about the good first half he had against Chelsea. He can't play the sort of game that Isaac played. He cannot do that. He was back to what he was when we played at Manchester United. He didn't have a touch in their half in the first half. And I mean, he's weak for a big man. You can push him about. He's not yet traditional centre forward. And I'm sick of saying, but he's got good feet and he's got a football brain. Fine. True. But is that going to excuse all he hasn't got? And the only way that you can get something out of Woltemade is not going to become Shearer or Ferdinand or Andy Cole or Supermac or Malcolm or Jackie overnight. He's not going to be a natural line leader. That is not his game. So what was he bought to do? Was he not bought to play as a 10 up against the centre forward? According to Eddie Howe, not. He's bought as a 9. How on earth did he buy him as a 9 when everybody I spoke to, upon him signing, by the way, not since, everybody I spoke to in Germany told me, you haven't got a 9, Gibbo, you've got a 10. So, what did we pay a club record fee for if he's not going to play as a 10?
That is the key question, but we can sit here and say, you and I and our viewers and listeners, formation changes needed, the system needs to change, play Woltemade as a 10, Wissa running off, play them up top. Don't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. But I'd bet my last penny, John, that the team on Tuesday will be the same formation, and I wouldn't be surprised, other than maybe a change on one of the flanks, that it's the same team.
Oh, I mean, yes, but what we're saying on here is what we believe should happen, not what we believe Eddie Howe will do, because that is a totally different thing. And I think you're right. I don't think he'll start them both together. And ironically, if he did, I bet he started one through the middle and one playing wide instead of one of the wingers. Not as a 2, not close together, not as a 2-pronged centre forward or a 10 behind the 9, but one as a centre forward and one wide. The great difference is we're not saying this will happen on Tuesday night. We're saying, I'm saying, in my opinion, this ought to happen. We've got to change it. We've got to start make people think about Newcastle, including our own players. They'll go away and they'll know it's just 1 for 1 or whatever, change for change and whatever. That's all it ever is. And if you're the opposition, if you're Burnley, Scott Parker now will be making his plans for the game on Tuesday night. And it doesn't matter who's outside left, Barnes or Gordon, or who's outside right, Murphy or Elanga. We will play the same way. So he can make his plans on us playing the same way and know he's safe to do that. And therefore he's got a good chance of his plans working out.
What I would like to see from Eddie on Tuesday in the team is something different, because we know that Burnley are going to set up in a low block. They're just going to sit back and try and invite Newcastle on. And if they do that, they'll probably have a lot of success, just as Man United did in the second half, just as nearly every single team, especially away from home, has had success just inviting Newcastle United on. And yet, as we've said there, it probably will be the same team and the same formation, which is mightily frustrating. And I want to ask you, John, about the criticism of Eddie Howe, because it has really risen up a level or two in recent games. And even after the Man United game, where it was an improvement, but again, nothing was created really, plenty of questions were asked. And it has split the fan base. And right now, right here, I'm not for 1 minute saying it's time for a change of manager. I still think Eddie Howe is the man to lead Newcastle United forward, but I think he has to change something within his system for it to work. But there is a fierce debate about whether Eddie Howe should come in for any criticism, whether there's other reasons for the poor form. The Isak impact from the summer, injuries, balancing the squad. Was it a poor summer transfer window? I think the point that I want to get across is that I think questions should be asked of Eddie Howe. They are being asked of Eddie Howe. I think he'll be asking questions of himself of the same degree, which is really important, because you don't want a manager who's sitting there and thinking everything's rosy in the tower when it's clearly not. But there's a lot of fans who are kind of saying, in many ways he's untouchable, and he's not, because I don't think it doesn't matter how successful you are. Even if Newcastle United were 5th or 6th in the league right now, John, I think you've always got to be reaching for more. You've always got to be striving to be better in any way of life. Right now, things are not going well, and there are valid questions to be asked of Eddie Howe, and I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Eddie Howe will go down in Newcastle United history as a legend, regardless of what happens, because he came here. He's manufactured 2 Champions League campaigns. He's manufactured 2 Wembley Cup finals, and he's won our first domestic cup. in 70 years. So he's already a legend. But the fact that you're a legend doesn't mean you're untouchable. Arsene Wenger was a legend at Arsenal for winning a lot more than Eddie Howe has won at Newcastle before he had a dry spell in his last X number of years, and he ends up being forced out. Yes, they make it a slightly different than the sack because they want the guy to be respected and it's mutual and all that. But effectively, he was told enough's enough. So it happens even to the and Fergie was very, very clever. The ultimate manager for winning trophies, sensational. He won the last league title, and he knew that side was going to break up and wasn't as good. He knew that was the best time to get out, and he got out, and well done him. He got out so that he was able to say, I left on my terms, and he did. But he knew that this couldn't go on forever. Eddie Howe is a Newcastle United legend. He has achieved what two legendary managers in Keegan and Robson failed to achieve, which is win something. But that does not mean you've got a free pass for the rest of time. That is not the way football works. Football is cutthroat. There is sometimes a ceiling beyond which managers can't get. I mean, Ranieri won the Leicester, the Premier League title, and got the sack a year later. It doesn't give you carte blanche. I'm not saying necessarily that Eddie should be got rid of. You've got to look at him and say, has he gone as far as he can? Because, you know, when you're climbing Everest, getting in, and if you're a real climber, not you and I, getting 3/4 of the way up is the easy part. It's the last tiny bit that's the difficult part where everybody starts failing. They don't fail in the bottom reaches. They don't fail halfway. They don't fail 3/4 way. From there onwards, they fail. And that could be the situation with Newcastle United. Maybe not. We can't knee-jerk. Certainly, this is not the time of year to get rid of Eddie Howe. Mid-season like this, with not any great managers out there waiting to be taken up, etc., etc. Let the season be seen out. We're still in the League Cup. We're still in the Champions League. Both of those may not last too long. And we've got Manchester City home and away in the League Cup. In the Champions League, we've got PSV where we must win, and Paris Saint-Germain where we won't win because it's a win, because they're a great side, even though they might have already qualified. So it is, the balloon could burst tomorrow. But it hasn't burst yet. And to do something now is not the time to do. Because also you've got to do it when it's to your advantage as a club. Not knee-jerk. Not knee-jerk. And to do something, and Eddie deserves the respect from it. And we know he's got it. We know that, forget what we think or the fans think or anybody else thinks. Those above him, those that matter at this moment, have not lost faith one iota in Eddie Howe. They may well. It can be very sudden. If we wake up in a month's time and we haven't made the League Cup final and we're still in the bottom half of the Premier League and we're facing a tough time in Europe, then the whole complex of the thing can matter. But it is right that Eddie Howe should be scrutinised. It's right that we're allowing the dignity for it to happen ordinarily and not with stupid trolls sitting suggesting all sorts of nonsensical things, because that is unfair, unreasonable, and is not the way to solve a problem. But there is a problem, and I'm wanting Eddie to start to try to solve it for himself. Change the team's tactics, change things, make other things happen, make the players think about it, make the fans think about it, but above all, make the opposition think about it, because they don't have to think about it at the moment. They know exactly what they're going to face. They know exactly where we're going to bomb on with Hall, etc., etc. They know what they're going to do in the middle of the park with Bruno. They know what Woltemade is not going to do, run beyond them, etc., etc. They know. It's predictable, it's predictable, it's predictable. Let us get out of that pattern. Because if we don't, we could wake up and we haven't won at Burnley. And that's the easiest away game outside of Wolverhampton Wanderers that you're going to get in the Premier League all season. So, we can't sacrifice this game. If ever there was a must-win, this is a must-win, and we've faced a lot of those. And by the way, when we've faced them and they've been away from home, we haven't won, which is why I said we're bang average. Let's forget about the soaring reputation of all these players individually. Collectively, they're bang average. I'm sorry, if you don't believe that, just go and have a look at the league table.
Yeah, let us know in the comments your thoughts on that. We do need these individuals to come together collectively and raise their game. You mentioned there, John, if you're looking at it positively, like you said, semi-final of the League Cup, going well enough in Europe, and look, a couple of wins, as you know, other teams have found out over the last couple of weekends, you shoot straight up the table. So all is not lost. And if we can just take positives, and if Eddie Howe can somehow make Newcastle United go from a team that performs well for one half of a game into a team that performs well for even just 75 minutes of the game, then doesn't manage to concede at the end, Newcastle United will start winning games. There's been enough green shoots of recovery, if you like, to look at things a little bit more positively. But we can't keep coming on to the podcast, and we can't keep it full time saying, oh, well, they played well for that 20 minutes, or they played well that for 45 minutes, and it just hasn't worked. Now, another defense of Eddie Howe, if you like, is that a lot of the goals that are being conceded, John, are individual errors. I mean, you look at that goal that Man United scored, Jacob Ramsey is totally at fault. You can then argue Aaron Ramsdale is at fault as well. There's nothing Eddie can do about that. And I think that's the big question as well, is how much responsibility do the players have to take? Because at the moment, right now, you could, on one hand, pick the players who are coming through the last month, 6 weeks with any credit. You know, Miley, Hall, brilliant against Manchester United. But other than that, there was no one that stood out. Bruno, for passion and drive, did. But again, not on anything that he did particularly in the game to impact it. You know, is that's not Eddie's fault, is it? You know, the players have to step up and take responsibility and help the manager out as well.
Yes, I have. And so has Eddie Howe got to step up and take responsibility and sort out the tactics and sort out those that aren't doing it for him. Because I'm sick of looking for shafts of light at the bottom of the pit shaft, because, and, the next game gives us a chance. And if we beat Burnley, you can shoot up the table with 3 points now. Do you realise our last 3 games, we've got 1 point out of 9? We've lost 1-0 at Sunderland. We've drawn at home to Chelsea 2-2, having squandered a 2-goal lead. And we've lost 1-0 at Manchester United. We've got 1 point out of 9. And by the way, we've deserved 1 point out of 9. Let's be truthful about that, because we haven't done enough. I mean, the 2 away games were totally different, Sunderland and Manchester United. But in both, we failed miserably for vastly different reasons. We had plenty of the ball against Manchester United, but we had no punch whatsoever. We had no inventiveness up here. We had no cuteness. We weren't clever at all. We just went through the motions and hoped it would work. And that's how bad Manchester United, shorn of all the good players, like Fernandes and the 2 wingers who were away at the African Cup, etc., they were struggling. Sunderland, just at home, and they showed it against Leeds, who played them off the park yesterday. They're not a great side. They're falsely placed in the league. But we just ran up a white flag. We have got 1 point out of 9. So where does our hope come from, Andrew? And it's about time that the players and Eddie faced that fact and did something about it, rather than we're talking. I mean, how on earth does Eddie Howe, this is only my opinion, Andrew, but how on earth does he say that Anthony Gordon played well at Manchester United? I mean, I thought he was what he is. He's a barometer of this team. He reflects what this team is. Wonderful one day when we're at home and we get a great result. Woeful the next day. He's an England World Cup winger. Where's his assists and where's his goals in the Premier League? Where are they? He didn't play well. I'm sorry. He did not play well. My eyes saw the game. Eddie might know a lot more about the game than me, than you, than all the fans and all that. But is he looking through rose-tinted glasses, or does he need to go to Specsavers? Because that wasn't a good display by Anthony Gordon for me.
Yeah. And maybe, he drops out of the side against Burnley as a little bit of a warning, although I don't imagine he will do. You asked, where the positivity comes from, and it comes from clutching at straws. Like I say, 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. But one thing that I did want to reference is that often when we see Newcastle United lose, you have players going on to social media and issuing, apologies, or we'll make it up in the next game. Now, I did have a look in the hours after, in the morning after the game against Manchester United. I didn't see one from Bruno, and it's just something little, but actually I think that's quite important, that his first thought wasn't to go onto social media and apologise. And if I've missed it, then I've missed it, and someone will tell me in the comments. But I think that's quite important, that actually, he's gone. Too many times we've gone on and said, we're sorry, we'll make it up in the next game. It's just words. We need actions. And I think that could be quite significant in many ways, and hopefully starting with the game on Tuesday against Burnley. Before we talk about the team, John, we've kind of said it's going to be unchanged, but we'll get into a few individuals. Do you fear the fact that Burnley are dreadful at home? They haven't won there since October. They haven't won in 9 games. They've drawn the last 2. They lost the last 7 on the bounce prior to that. And we often joke that Newcastle United is exactly what the doctor ordered for these teams. And I've got to say, joking aside, there's a very real fear within me that, Burnley could unwrap a very late Christmas present on Tuesday.
Well, I mean, that tells you how far we've sunk when we're thinking like that. We are playing the second worst team in the Premier League by a million miles, by the way. I mean, Wolves are dead men walking. But Burnley are nothing. Burnley are awful. They're dreadful. Honestly, they couldn't start a fire with a bunch of matches. They're hopeless. And so if you don't win there, where do you win? But I know where your apprehension's coming from. It could be the dullest of draws, 1-1 or 0-0. But I mean, they are hopeless, and if you beat them, we're not walking in a garden of roses again, by any means, because you ought to beat them. But we've got to go down there and beat them. It is nonsense to think that we're not going to do that. Yet, we beat them up here. They won my first league double of the season, but it wasn't that easy up here. And they are dreadful. But we've got to get amongst it. We've got to shake ourselves up. It's all, on Tuesday night, it's all about us. What's our attitude? What's our team formation? What's our individual players? What is the message from the manager? It's all about us. It's not about it. We've said we're predictable to them if Eddie doesn't change things, because they know exactly the way we play. They're predictable to us. We know what they're about. We know what they're not about. We know what they can do, but we know what they can't do. So it's a matter of us doing something different, surprising them. We went to Manchester United and were surprised when Manchester United kicked off, because our formation was not the way they'd even warmed up on the pitch just before the kickoff. We surprised ourselves. All of a sudden, Ramsdale's got to go down injured, in question marks, so that we can get a message on the field to go to something else. So we've got to surprise them and surprise ourselves. We've got to give ourselves hope, the travelling fans hope, and the fans at home sitting watching on television hope, by doing something different. If Eddie Howe picks the same team again, and by the team, I'm not meaning personnel, formation. He can switch his wingers, but if it's Bonds for Gordon and if it's Elanga for Murphy, what's changed? Nothing, actually. Nothing has changed. And whoever plays the third midfielder, be it Ramsey, Willock, or Joe Linden, nothing's changed again, because it's same old, same old. The format is exactly the same. When we make changes during the game, it's like for like. We've got to stop doing like for like and coming out with something else. We really have, because it's becoming so predictable, it's boring. And it's so obvious to the opposition. We never surprise the opposition. Never surprise them. They know what they're going to get. They know what they're not going to have to face with Woltemade at centre forward. They know exactly what it's all about. The high press, the winger. I mean, what are we getting from the flanks these days? You know, we talked about having great wingers, and when we had Isaac, and then we had Gordon firing like a bomb, and we had Murphy having his best season he's ever had last season, it was a whole different ball game, wasn't it? The centre forward was scoring 27. Gordon was producing such regular scintillating form. He was an England winger, and Murphy was having his best season of his whole career. What's the three going to produce on Tuesday night compared with that?
Well, we can only hope. Just a quick reminder, this episode is sponsored by NordVPN. Do get into the podcast description box to get your discounted offer. No risk with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You have one subscription, and that can be used across 10 devices. Public Wi-Fi, you often use it if you're on the bus, if you're on the train, in a cafe, in a restaurant. Well, NordVPN offers you that added extra element of security. And we're also sponsored by fpro.com, the trainer map, which can enhance your skills. Yes, you can make the joke that maybe we should drop some off at the Newcastle United training ground. I'll look to get that organised if I can. You can get a discounted offer up to 60%. It'd be the perfect late Christmas present for any budding footballers in the household. Drills built by UEFA coaches, which you use on the app. The mat can fit into pretty much any space in the household, and it can be even used outside. So hit that link in the podcast description box. Want to talk, John, about the starting 11. We've said it, you know, what we would do, but we've also said what we think Eddie Howe will do, and let us know in the comments what you think Eddie Howe will do and what you would do, and I'm sure it might be slightly different. I want to talk about Jacob Ramsey because he's had a tough time of it of late, John, come up for plenty of criticism. He had that unfortunate error on the edge of Manchester United's box where he's fallen over instead of taking a shot. I put out on social media yesterday, like, let's all remember when Joelinton was going through a tough period. He did something similar when he managed to take a shot and hit himself in the face. My wider point was, let's not write him off. Let's not write Elanga off after only a few months at a brand new club. Yes, they've not lived up to the price tag. Yes, they've done nothing to really encourage us that there's a brilliant player there. But at the same time, they're pulling on that black and white shirt. They're giving their all. I think Ramsey will probably start against Burnley. The last thing he needs, if there's a misplaced pass or if he gets tackled early on in the game, is groans. And I'm sure the away fans who are there won't be doing that. But on social media, it's a different story. I mean, what would you say to fans about Jacob Ramsey? Are you still holding out hope?
Well, you've got to hold out hope. They've paid £40 million for him. But I tell you what, let's get rid of excuses. Jacob Ramsey in Elanga hasn't done it. And they had nothing to get used to coming to Newcastle, apart from physical demands, because they were Premier League players. They knew the Premier League. At least Chow and Woltemade is coming from abroad. And they didn't take time to get used to Newcastle United. Chow become a sensation straight away, and Woltemade started off scoring goals. He's tapered off since somewhat. But there would have been an excuse for them needing time to settle down into Newcastle. They proved they didn't need time. Why does Elanga and Ramsey need time when they're coming from the Premier League? They already know what the Premier League's about. The only thing you could say is, can they play the Newcastle high press game, etc., etc. But no, we aren't playing that now with Woltemade, or we're not playing it successfully. So why? I mean, probably you can see, I know I'm getting a bit sick of making excuses. I'm getting fed up with living with making excuses. I don't know why Elanga and Ramsey haven't hit the ground running more than I have. I mean, Ramsey's been better than Elanga, but I've been better than Elanga and I haven't been on the pitch. So, you know, I cannot keep making excuses for these guys. These players under us, all of them. I'm suggesting that not many of them is as good as they think they are. And it's about time that was accepted by them and accepted by Eddie. And we started from basics and we pricked all the egos and we started again on the way Eddie started 3 or 4 seasons back when we were building up from being relegation side to the good side we are. Yes, I'm not asking to throw Elanga or Ramsey to the to the Dogs. And if they can't play against Burnley, who can they play against? But I tell you what, if I get a team sheet and both their names are on it on Tuesday night before the game, I'm not going to be full of just, how many are we going to beat Burnley by?
But interestingly, because you've mentioned this prior, that maybe we're not as good as we think we are. Maybe these players aren't as good as they think they are and as we think they are. But then the question is, with that in mind, are Newcastle United not exactly where they should be then if they've bought players who...
Oh, yes. That's why I said we are bang average. We've got to stop deluding ourselves that we are a top 4 side, but we're in wolves' clothing sort of thing, and we're dead and lucky not to be in the top 4. And as long as we keep going the way we are now, results will automatically turn, and we will be in the top 4 come the end of the season.
But then the other question is Eddie Howe not just doing a good job then with what he's got? If we're bang average, what is bang average? Is that mid-table?
Yes, which is where we are. Oh, we're not quite at mid-table. We're below mid-table. We're bang average for the way we're playing. The players aren't as good as they think they are. They're not as good as they were last season and those that have been here long enough, 2 years ago when we first made the Champions League, and last season when we won the League Cup. If you look at the League Cup last season when we played Liverpool, is our midfield 3 anywhere near the way they played that day? They're not as good now as they were then. Now, why? Why is Joe Linton falling off the mountainside? He looks nothing like the player he was. I'll tell you what, Tonali doesn't. Tonali does not look like the player he was last season. Now, is it because he's had an illness? Is it because he's had an injury? Is it because he's going to be the next to want to go as Isak was? I mean, Isak at the back end of last season didn't look what he was and we know now why, because he was looking for a move. I'm not suggesting that's a Tonali thing, but I tell you what, I'm not recognising Sandro Tonali now of the one that I reckon when I was blown away by seeing him and saying, isn't this sensational? Aren't we lucky? Isn't this the greatest midfield player in Europe, probably? I'm not seeing that man now.
Yeah, a lot of players who haven't lived up to their past reputations, but hopefully 2026 can bring a bit of much needed improvement. As we said there, we think it'll probably be an unchanged side, not really too much Eddie Howe.
I would like to see Pope playing goal.
Do you think he'll be back?
I would like to think he'd be back. I don't know, because I can't guess Eddie now, and Eddie press conferences may as well not happen because you don't actually find out the exact situation. I mean, it was the last press conference before we played at Man U. It was whether Pope would be fit or not, and might he come back? Oh, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. Then he's actually on the bench, and we think, oh, that's something. And then afterwards, he tells us he's actually been ill and had absolutely no chance of playing. So he was just on the bench rather than ready. So we just don't know. We're not told these things. I lived in the old days when you were told these things, but you're not told these things anymore, so we don't know. But I'm dying for him to come back, and I'm not suggesting he's the answer long-term to our goalkeeping problem. That's something we'll look at in the summer. But I want him back in the team. I would want Pope back as part of the reshuffle, and I would play Woltemade and Wissa, and he won't. And you would either drop the third midfielder or one of your wingers to accommodate them playing as a 9 and 10. That's what I would do, because I'm demanding change to change a predictable pattern of mediocrity. But I'm not suggesting it'll happen. That's a totally different matter.
Yeah, I think if Nick Pope is over his illness and he's fit, then I could see him coming back in. Ramsdale hasn't covered himself in glory at all.
And he got a poor hand. He got a poor hand to the shot for the goal, for the Man United goal as well.
Yeah,
there was other mistakes, of course there was, and we never mentioned Woltemade's header, which had as much power in it. It was like playing beach volleyball, wasn't it? Just went straight up and down. He's had 2 wonderful defensive headers in the last 2 away games at Sunderland and there. There was a lot of mistakes, but it did include Ramsdale getting a weak hand to it. I would have Ramsdale. I mean, we haven't kept a clean sheet in 11 matches. So Ramsdale, who's the majority of that, or hasn't had a clean sheet since he come back, and let's change that. Let's go back to Pope if he's available. We've just got to pick the best that is available because we're not into January yet where we can get reinforcements. So, I mean, I would go Pope and I would look to go Wissa and Woltemade because we need to do something. Please do something.
Yeah, I mean, I would go with the two up top, but it's just not going to happen. So that's when I say it's unchanged, is because I think that's what Eddie will do. But do let us know in the comments, guys, what your starting 11 would be, and would you agree with John that it needs to be something drastic? Would you play the two up top? All that remains to be done then, John, is to ask for your prediction. How is this one going to go?
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. All I can say is that surely we must win this one. Because if we don't, tell me, apart from Wolves, where we're going to win anyone away from home. I mean, this is a real opportunity because if you're organised and if you're playing to the best of your ability and if you've got any confidence, at least you're on a draw when you get there, aren't you? They can't win. You're on a draw from the kickoff. So surely they can win this game. And I'm going to say we're going to win, but only just with the last with a 1 goal margin. It may well be 1-0. But I've got to say we're going to win because if I say we're not going to win this game, I'm never going to forecast a win away from home for the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, 100% spawn. I mean, if I'm going with my head, I'm going to predict something I don't want to predict, so I'm not going to go with my head. I'm going to go with my heart. But even that's not something I want to say, and it'd be a 1-1 draw. I just don't think Newcastle United are in a really good enough place to beat Burnley. That sounds horrible to say it, but I think the knock-on effect of that Man United game, John, is actually more negative than a lot of people might think, because they've given their all in terms of effort, but they've still been unable to break down a Manchester United side, which by the end of it, not even the manager, their own manager, knew what system he was playing. It was full of youngsters, and yet they weren't tested at all. And I think I texted someone after the game and said that actually that defeat could be even bigger than the Sunderland defeat in many ways, the kind of knock-on impact. I think that starts with Tuesday against Burnley, where I think they will rock up and it'll feel much more than a 1-0 defeat against Manchester United. It'll feel like an absolute thumping, and it's all about the confidence and approach, and they need something different, but I don't think Eddie's going to do that.
But isn't it frightening? Isn't it frightening, Andrew, that we're apprehensive or we're nervous or we feel we mightn't be able to guarantee to say that we'll beat Burnley? And by the way, we're saying, I said this team was bang average. Well, we're not bang average, but we're scared to say we'll beat Burnley because we think it'll be tough to do that. If you're at all apprehensive about saying we'll beat Burnley, you're bang average, kid. And that is the truth of the matter, and we're stuck with facing it. I mean, when we first qualified with Eddie for the Champions League in that season, our away record was 8 victories, 8 draws, and 3 defeats. 3 defeats away from home all season. We've already had 5 defeats now away from home. So we're not as good as we were. And by the way, winning it at Burnley won't make us as good as we are, but it will half help with 6 home games to come over 3 different competitions in the new year. We haven't got an away game for an eternity in the new year. And thank goodness for that. But you know what that means? You've got a lot of away games to come later on because you've got to play away at some stage. So we're going to hit them later on. But for goodness sake, if we can't beat Burnley, apart from Wolves, who can we beat away from home? Are we going to sit here for the rest of the season and not be able to forecast an away win?
Well, fingers crossed they do pick up a win at Turf Moor on Tuesday. Let us know in the comments, ladies and gents, your score prediction ahead of that game. A big thanks to John for popping on to the podcast. I hope you have a wonderful new year, John. And we'll be back ahead of that game against Crystal Palace, which is a huge game at St James's Park next weekend. Thank you very much for watching and tuning in. Do get in the comments, and we'll see you guys very soon.